both YouTube and LinkedIn to pick up the signal. Go live. Okay, both of them are. We should be live on both. I should mute myself because I hear myself somewhere here and somewhere here. Okay, all done. So Adrian, thanks so much for joining the SPDX community, the SPDX YouTube live stream, and the SPDX LinkedIn live stream. Where are you joining from?
Redmond, Washington today. And thank you for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Like many people have requested your presence here because the work that you get to explain now that you did and are still doing at Microsoft are really interesting. But wait, so it's quite early, right? I guess over there because it's 4 p.m. over here in the UK, where I'm based in London. What about you? What time is it?
Yeah, 8 a.m. Pacific. So,
God.
Yeah, I'm still drinking my coffee.
Okay. So tell us about a bit your background and what is your charter, your remit over there at Microsoft, without going into the details of the project that we're going to talk about. Where is it that you do and what drove you in general, I guess, to security, maybe SBOM, supply chain?
Yeah, so I've been in the cybersecurity industry for the better part of 15 years. I've been drawn to it because of the mission. We are frontline defenders in the cyber war, and as defenders, we always need better information to accomplish our goal and protect our assets. And so at Microsoft, I lead the secure software supply chain team, which drives the central strategy to secure all of Microsoft's end-to-end software supply chain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So of which SBOM is just one piece of that overall puzzle. And so it's been an incredible journey. The software supply chain space has been a burgeoning industry where many people have been scrambling to find answers for a couple of years, ever since the SolarWinds incident took place. That's when it really kind of took hold as a buzzword across the industry. And so it comes up to protecting the developer.
Because without getting too political or geopolitical, but setting the context a bit, many people, and me as the host of Software Engineering Daily, a podcast that I host, that I'm one of the hosts of, I've interviewed several people in the cyberspace, like Mikko Hyppönen from F-Secure and others, and people don't realize that we are technically at war, right? And by we, I mean, I guess, all nations or the West against a few others. And again, I don't want to get into a deep analysis because it's not my forte. Having said that, there is a concept called maybe hybrid war that says that nations are competing against each other, not with all the legal, legitimate mechanisms that we all know of and that we hopefully only use those. But it turns out that we do attack each other, and software has become such a critical asset that its value is increased. And those that have incredibly good assets, in this case, good software or software supply chains, for example, the US, suffer a lot of attacks in those sense. So whether you qualify those attacks as war, hybrid war or not, that's irrelevant. I would consider so, I guess, but again, not the purpose of this conversation. But it turns out that software has become critical infrastructure that is being attacked, whether it's foreign agents, national agents, whatever, right? And it has become the target of an increased number of attacks and an increased number. And the damage it creates is massive, right? Because you mentioned SolarWinds, but I can remember, I'm not the most proficient in vulnerabilities, breaches, and attacks in general in the US, but if I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, just that SolarWinds was several years ago, but not very long ago, a petrol gas pipeline in the east coast of the US, or the infrastructure running that, the supply chain running that, the software running that, was completely compromised. And that is people potentially dying because it's very cold in the US and other places. So do you agree with this scenario? Again, ignore a bit the hybrid war definition, unless you want otherwise, but what is the scenario in which software supply chains are right now?
Yeah, so Microsoft produces a lot of software across the world, and so what what securing the software supply chain, the ultimate mission there is increasing the trust in Microsoft software. What can I do to build security into the development process such that our customers can trust that the software that we produce has not been tampered with in some way?
Yeah.
So that's ultimately the core goal that I have, and I recognize that software supply chain is a vast, expansive space. So there are other people that worry about. So it's not my team's responsibility to worry about where do we have third-party software deployed, in the cloud or something like that. That is a different security team's job to manage that risk. I'm focused on protecting the developer and the software that we create and publish.
Okay, so in that picture, you said that SBOMs came to become relevant at some point. When did that happen? When did you realize that SBOMs in general were adding value to that charter of yours, right? Of providing trust and reliance on the build mechanisms, the compilers, whatever tools software Microsoft is providing to its software engineers, to the software engineers that use it.
So we were researching this for quite some time, and I would say the first industry working group that we really became a part of and really contributed to was CISQ, a Consortium for Information and Software Quality. And they had an initiative called Tool-to-Tool Software Bill of Materials Exchange, or 3T SBOM.
Exactly.
And that was in 2019 is when we were, so this is well before the executive order. We've believed in SBOMs and their value, and we were working on defining yet another schema. And the work that we ended up doing in the 3T SBOM community ended up being contributed toward the SPDX 3.0 schema. So that kind of,
because those communities, CISQ and SPDX, became one eventually.
Yes, that is correct. And so, we've been looking at this for quite some time. We have been looking at SBOMs as a way for more accurate software inventory. And additionally, there's additional value props that they provide, such as they contain the files list of everything that was produced from the build. And so if SBOMs are generated at build time, we want to validate the hashes contained in the SBOM against the artifacts that are going through release to make sure that nothing has been tampered with between build and release. Establishing kind of like a chain of custody as we ship things out the door, and making sure that no additional files were included in the release that are not listed in the SBOM, those sorts of things. So we are getting additional security value out of it, over and above just the providing software transparency to our customers.
Is there, by the way, are you using this yourselves as Microsoft? So not only are you, my question would be, is that not only are you providing this to anyone developing software with Microsoft tools, but is Microsoft doing this for your own products?
Are we? Oh, yes. So yeah, we are generating SBOMs today for a vast majority of our software. We still don't have it everywhere yet, but that's okay. We will get there. And we are just starting to move into the preparing for consumption. So we've shared out some requirements to some of our partners and gave them an early heads up so that they have time. We've given them tools to help it make it easier on them to meet this requirement of providing us with an SBOM. And so we are, you know, steadily moving through all different phases of the SBOM, from generation, preparing to share with the U.S. federal government and for FDA medical devices that need to be certified, and preparing for consumption. So there's kind of like these big three categories, if you will.
So there's a blog post that you posted a couple of years back in Microsoft's blog, the dev blog, actually. I'll link it in the show notes. And I'll ask you in a minute about if you could walk us through the build provenance information, how that works in detail. But yes, I mean, about having this propagated to all of Microsoft. First of all, you mentioned it. This is a huge company producing, I mean, with so many different pieces of software that build and so forth. But I think that despite the hype around SBOMs in general across the world right now, I think we are in the early stages, and you guys have been pioneers in this sense. So despite what I'm trying to say is that despite the hype there is, everyone is at the in the infancy of the adoption of these tools, because like SPDX, they are standard, so they require large consensuses even across companies, right? So not all of Microsoft seems to be on board, and it's completely normal because the industry is not on board of one single thing. So anyway, we will get there, and this is the point of these sessions and these interviews, that even the big players have started the journey earlier than others, as you can see, but still there's a lot of way to go. So could you run us through the how the build provenance works in the at Microsoft? How do you do it?
Yeah, so internally, we have at the same time we generate the SBOM, we also generate a separate file that's our build provenance file. So this allows us to capture the repo ID, the branch, the build pipeline and build ID, capture all of that information about who triggered the build and what are the other inputs going into the build, such as the repo. So that kind of gives us more of a full picture in terms of what are all the inputs that are going into the build. The SBOM captures the other inputs, the other dependencies, and then we get to store this as evidence that we use internally for validation, for traceability, for auditing. And it's useful within the system for making sure that the repo is the expected repo that's being that's producing the build. So that's that provenance file. But yes, we have been going at this for quite some time. We have to I guess we have an additional challenge of trying to solve these problems at scale, which can sometimes take a little bit more time to solve these problems versus maybe a smaller team.
Yeah, indeed.
How do we get all of Microsoft on board with this? And so there's techniques that we've done to ensure adoption across. Our focus has been making sure that the software that is in scope for the executive order, make sure that those are conformant to all the executive order requirements before we try to roll this out to everybody. We want to.
Can you clarify? In the case, because there's several legislative efforts. The EU is leading, Cyber Resilience Act. Japan has got their own legislation coming through, or already approved. I can't remember, but you're referring to the most, probably the earliest one, and the one that's probably moving fastest, which is the executive order that the Biden administration put out a couple of years ago. And the scope of it, can you elaborate on that, or just define it better? Because it's not.
Happy to. Thank you. So U.S. Presidential Executive Order 14028 came from the Biden administration in response to the SolarWinds incident. The SolarWinds incident affected the world globally, and we needed to some sort of a catalyst to try to strengthen the nation's cybersecurity. And so the U.S. federal government basically said, well, we can't make everyone abide by these secure supply chain requirements, but we can require companies and software producers that we buy from to meet these requirements.
And the US federal government is a large buyer of software, right? So it's a huge incentive.
Yes. So it kind of got us started down this path of, okay, if we have to make all of our software that we sell to the federal government meet these requirements, we need to make all of our software meet these requirements. That was obvious to us. And so we some of those requirements were new, and what we did is we incorporated these requirements into our the Microsoft Secure Development Lifecycle. The SDL is the set of requirements that we've been following since its inception in 2004 and has been evolving ever since, because security is a constant game of defending against the latest state of the art of what the attacker is able to do. And, with technology changes, new requirements need to change. And so this got all merged into the SDL, which is like, within the fabric of Microsoft. It's how we build and secure our software by default. So that's the U.S. executive order. And we went and so for those that are still, not familiar, you can look at the NIST Secure Software Development Framework, SSDF version 1.1. That set of requirements or controls ended up becoming the official executive order requirements that anybody had to abide by if they wanted to sell to the U.S. federal government.
Sometimes those are called or referred to as MVP, a minimum viable SBOM, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah. So as part of the executive order, the NTIA at the time had the charter to define the minimum required elements of an SBOM. When you look at the schemas of SBOMs today, there's a lot of different fields that they can contain.
Oh yeah,
SBOM had to have this kind of bare minimum set in order to provide value and transparency to our customers.
I honestly think it's a very practical approach, in this case from NTIA, and I think other agencies are supporting it because one of the most common feedback that newcomers to the SBOM field, newcomers, those approaching SBOMs for the first time, is that they feel daunting, that they've got so much information. And I was discussing this with Google, with one of the Google engineers that incorporated SPDX to Bazel, their build system, or an open source build system they maintain. That, by definition, SPDX is a dictionary, a vocabulary, an ontology. I'm using all those as synonyms of all software development, of all software components, right? So what is a library? What is a file? The definition of all those things and the relationship with all of them. So if you're familiar with the concept of an ontology in philosophy or a vocabulary in language, you know immediately that those things are bulky and very detail oriented and very precise and so forth. So, and they should be that way. But it turns out that for newcomers, right, to learn the whole English vocabulary, or the ontology of whatever philosophical system, it's not an easy thing to do. And we all have work, we all have, really practical goals to achieve. So the NTIA's definition of what a minimal viable, and it might sound like it's bare bones, but I think it's enough to start with, and it provides a very solid framework to get on ramp the rest of SPDX or any other SBOM out there. So that is my convoluted explanation of what this was, the context of it. But I think it's a very practical, very sensible approach to starting or incentivizing the industry to onboard these things, because otherwise they feel daunting. I don't know if you agree with this.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's because that came out that Microsoft felt the need. We needed to make sure we were going to be conformant with the executive order, and so we built our own tool. As I stated before, we were getting involved with SBOMs even before the executive order. So we were producing our own proprietary format previously. And so we just converted that into the SPDX schema. And then we, went forward with our SBOM generator and open sourced it, because we felt that others would need to be able to do this as well, and we wanted to make sure that that anybody that needed to could do this. So when we open sourced our SBOM generator, we made sure it was cross-platform support, so it works across Windows, Linux, and Mac, and it's a general purpose SBOM generator. So it looks for multiple different language packages across. Because we don't know what software environment you're using. We want to just check for it all. And that way you can use a single tool for all of your different builds, rather than trying to go find this language specific generator, like just for JavaScript, or this one that's just for Python. So it kind of allows you to standardized there. And then the other thing that we're pretty proud of that our tool can do is it finds the transitive dependencies. So when you install a dependency and just by nature it installs 5 others, we capture that full chain of dependencies.
That is amazing. The fact that it's language agnostic. By the way, I'm looking at the repo. You can find it in GitHub easily. Can be installed through Homebrew. Even runs in a Docker image. It's got a NuGet package, of course, and so forth. But the fact that it can cast a wide net onto with a language agnostic approach. And catch even transitive dependencies, which are quite tricky, not easy to do, because by definition they are dynamic and change a lot. Is quite a nifty tool, and a very intelligent approach. So I'd like to thank you for releasing that to the public.
Yeah, thank you. And we're continuing to update it all the time. We're committed to delivering a quality product. So there's things that we're looking to enhance and improve the amount of data that we include in the SBOM to make it even more valuable and everything. So
this actually, I mean, we're approaching the end, because I like to keep these chats quite short. What should we expect, or what should anyone either buying Microsoft software or building Microsoft software, what should he or she expect from your team in with regards to not only SBOMs, but in general software supply chain security and transparency tools in this way? Are you planning to? Where are you? What is your vision about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So our SBOM generator is available as a binary. It can also be used to do the validation that I described earlier. So if you wanted to set it up to do the validation in your release pipelines, you could do that as well. We have released open source code for a proof of concept of SPDX 3.0, the next gen schema.
Oh, nice.
So that's out there as well. I know that SPDX has done a release candidate. And so, we all expect to see 3.0 land really, really soon. So we have some code out there for that. Additionally, something that my team has published is called the Secure Supply Chain Consumption Framework, or S2C2F.
Oh, okay.
We contributed this to the Open SSF, the Open
Correct.
Security Foundation. It's a framework, so it's a set of requirements, and it's hyper-focused on mitigating against open source supply chain threats. So, there's been a large amount of attacks specifically targeting open source, trying to compromise open source packages, and developers, unknowingly ingest this compromised package into their development environment. Attackers have basically been shifting left. And so we as defenders need to be shifting left as well. And this is a set of requirements about how to securely consume open source into the developer's workflow. Things like language packages like NPM, NuGet, PyPy, Maven, on and on. And I just want to say that we've organized those requirements into a set of maturity models. And for any organization that's preparing to generate SBOMs, I highly encourage you to take a look at the level 2 requirements. The level 2 requirements are all about leveraging technology to patch your open source faster. And the faster you patch, the better OSS hygiene you have. And the better OSS hygiene you have, the better looking your SBOMs will be that you end up sharing with your customers. And I think there's a lot of people out there today that are just trying to warm up and get comfortable with the idea of SBOMs and sharing them outwardly. And so highly encourage that. And so, what does the future hold? We'll see. I think there's much more to come, though.
I do agree that I like the more soft approach of the American market and the American administration that we just went through. So how the executive order is actually not incredibly prescriptive and detail oriented, and then it came with let's call it an MVP through NTIA, and how the industry's now big players and small players and the open source community sharing frameworks, so that gradually, because I said it at the beginning, I think you agree, that we have spotted the massive problem, which is how critical software has become and how many attacks it's receiving. But there's no solution. One solution fits all the problems. So frameworks, minimum viable approaches, and sort of like generalist tools that are language agnostic and that catch transitive dependencies and stuff like that are the way to go to sort of like narrow down the scope of the problem, right, from different perspectives. So I really like this, the way the American corporations, American market, and the American government is approaching this as opposed to Europeans, which are different. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just prefer this one. And I really particularly appreciate what Microsoft has done. Anyone wondering where these tools are? Well, the frameworks that Adrian just mentioned are probably most likely hosted in, correct me if I'm wrong, OpenSSF's website. Yep. But all the tools that you mentioned are hosted in GitHub's, in Microsoft's entity in GitHub, which is obviously github.com/Microsoft. And this the tool that we've described that generates and even validates at build the SBOM generated is called SBOM-tool. Yes. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think so. That was great. Thanks, Jordy.
Thanks so much for being so early with us. Thanks so much for contributing this, for leading this in a corporation that is so fundamental to software in general. And looking forward to SPDX 3.0. The release candidate is out there. There might be another release candidate, but general availability of 3.0 is around the corner. So hopefully that nudges also, again, the industry to become provide tools that are compliant with these standards that are getting better each day. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Fantastic. Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.